Dead stars don't sing. That's the first thing they teach you at the Ash Meridian, and it is the first thing that is a lie. The Meridian is the Kalari Compact's capital. White towers stacked on a black ring, mirror-robed officials drifting through marble record halls, a bureaucracy so old it has forgotten it is a bureaucracy and believes it is a mountain range. And at the center of all of it, hanging in the sky like a held breath, is the lantern of the last road, the derelict stellar cage the Athvan left behind when they quietly expired 30,000 years ago. I heard it my first night on the station, the night I was dragged up the gangway with a warrant in my pocket and a price on my head that the Compact had decided to convert, at a discount, into useful labor. I stood on the observation deck with my gloves off, face tilted up at that enormous dark thing, and I heard it through the deck plates, through the station's hum, through 3 kilometers of marble and prefectures and lies. A low note, somewhere very deep, holding steady under all the noise. A-flat, the only pitch that makes my ribs vibrate. I had heard that note before, in the deep seams of the human mining worlds, the places where the rock has been squeezing itself for 1 billion years and is not finished squeezing yet. You don't spend 11 years inside the bones of dead worlds and mistake that sound for anything else. It is the sound a broken heart makes when it is still trying to beat. The officers in their mirror robes laughed at me when I said so. "That star is dead human," said Prefect Velkair, and his voice was the color of clean linen, even patient, utterly certain of itself. He did not rise from his chair. He never rises for vermin, and I was vermin that season, a human, a rim dweller, a dead, a stray dog that had wandered into the marble hall. Dead longer than your species has had fire. Dead longer than your species has had hands to make fire with. It is a tomb, and it is a museum, and it is none of your business. And in 11 days you will be put to work in the lower registries, and you will forget the sky exists, which is what the sky deserves for being so disappointing. They were half right. That is the thing about the Compact. They are never wrong. They are simply half right, and the half they are wrong about is always the half that matters. The name of the thing is not really a name. The Kalari call it the Lantern of the Last Road, and they say it with the reverence other species reserve for graves they are afraid to visit. It is a cage, first of all. 10,000 kilometers of orbital ribs, forged bone white, articulated like the fingers of a hand big enough to close around a moon. Built by the Athvan, the elder race, when they were young and full of light, to hold a star the way a lantern holds a flame. Inside the cage, where a flame belongs, there is nothing now. A hollow, a negative space, the shape of absence, sketched in light that used to live there. And the road, 900 gate rings, strung across the dark like prayer beads on a string a god dropped and forgot to pick up. Star to star to star, the road of 900 gates had once been the spine of the galaxy, the commerce of suns, a shipping lane for whole civilizations, a river of light flowing through the ribs of that enormous cage. All of it dark now, because a lantern with no flame lights nothing. The gates are dead, the road is dead, and the Kalari built their capital around the corpse of it, the way a crab builds a house in the skull of something that used to swim. And at the lantern's equator, colder than the vacuum, colder than the shadow of the ribs, colder than the space between stars, there is the morning ring. Nobody touches the morning ring. I check the records, because checking records is what you do when everyone around you treats the dark like a god, and the god like a museum. 900 years of Kalari engineers have crawled over this structure. They have repaired the ribs. They have polished the struts. They have cataloged, in 40,000 volumes, every rivet and seam of the cage. And in 900 years, not one of them has run a bare hand along that ribbon of folded metal at the equator. Not once. They scrub it with light, from a distance. They photograph it with instruments that never touch. They built the observation decks so the windows face away from it, which is a thing nobody does unless something on the other side of the glass is looking back. I touched it on my 3rd day in the Meridian system, which was 11 days before my sentence began, which was, as it turned out, exactly enough time to do something stupid. I stole a service skiff. It was not a great theft. The Compact leases its service skiffs the way other species lease breath, through forms, but I filled out the forms with a ghost's name and a dead man's clearance code, and nobody noticed Because nobody thinks a vermin in a borrowed coat is going anywhere except the lower registries, and because the skiff was scheduled for decommission anyway. The irony of that did not occur to me until later. Everything in that system was scheduled for decommission except the things that were already dead. I flew out past the ripstruts, through the quarantine cordon that the compact maintained around the ring, with what they sincerely believed was deep caution and what was actually just superstition with a budget. The cordon had a hole in it the size of a service skiff, because every system has a hole in it the size of a service skiff, if you read enough forms. And then I was under the ring, and the ring was above me, and I killed the drive and drifted up with my hand out. Cold. Not the cold of space, which is a lie anyway. A nothing cold. An absence. A vacuum that cannot touch you, because there is nothing there to touch you with. This was a cold with weight. A cold that pressed. It came up through the skiff's hull like a hand coming up through water, and I felt it in my teeth before I felt it in my fingers. The deep seemed cold. The holding its breath cold. The cold of the places where human crews have died with their lamps on and their backs straight, because the dark in those seams was not the absence of light, but the presence of something else, something that wanted the space. I drifted in until my palm, 5 layers of glove liner thick, was flat against the metal. The metal was not metal. It was colder than metal has a right to be, and it was alive, not in the way that words are alive, in the way that meaning lives inside them. In the way a bell is alive for the instant after you strike it. Under my palm, through the numbness, I felt it. A pulse. Slow. Deep. A pressure note. A-flat. The same note the deck plates had been singing since I arrived, and I understood in that moment that the deck plates had not been singing alone. They had been answering. The whole station had been answering, for 900 years, and no one noticed, because no one listened, because you cannot hear a note you have been inside your whole life. It is the first law of drowning. The fish is the last to notice the water. The star was not dead. Nothing that hums like that is dead. It was banked. I stayed there for 4 hours, hanging in the skiff's shadow, my hand flat on the ring, and I read it the way you read an old wall at night, with your palms instead of your eyes. The Athvan wrote in pressure. Everyone knows this. Their script is not drawn. It is pressed. Meaning carved into the surfaces of things in patterns you feel through your skin, patterns that speak to the pressure of your own hand, that answer your grip the way a river answers a stone. The Kalari know this. They teach in school, and then they forget it, because they read with their eyes, and their eyes are liars, and their hands have been gloved for 30,000 years. The ring was full of the writing. Once I stopped trying to see it and started letting it press into me, it was everywhere, under my palm, under my cheek when I leaned in, along the ribs of my forearm where I braced against the drift. Pressure language, cold, patient, laid down by hands that have been dead for an age of the galaxy, and I could read just enough of it, because you do not spend 11 years in the scenes of dead worlds without learning to read the walls, to understand that I was not reading a relic. I was reading a label. The ring is not a remnant of the lantern. The compact has it wrong, like they have everything wrong. The ring is a lock. Someone sealed that star on purpose. 30,000 years ago, someone went inside the light and turned it down and locked the door behind them and banked the coals so carefully that they are still warm under all that pressure cold. And I found the seam, one seam, 1/2 meter long, no wider than a hair, invisible to the compact's instruments because it is not a crack. It is a mouth, and a mouth only opens when someone who knows the word speaks it. The mouth was not sealed against intruders. I could tell. The way you can tell a door was left unlocked for someone in particular. It was sealed against the dark, and it was left with a word on it. A word in pressure script, pressed into the metal by a hand that knew someone would come. The word it presses, I still don't know if I read it right. I have asked myself 1,000 times since. Standing in the light of the star I helped wake, whether I read what was written or what I wanted to be written. The Kalari would say the difference matters. The Kalari say a great deal. The word was soon. I went back to the station, and I walked into the prefect's marble office without knocking, which is a capital crime in the compact for a species with a pulse. And I stood in front of his desk, and I said, "That star is not dead." Velkair did what prefects do. He laughed, and 500 mirrors in his robe turned the light of the room into a small sun pointed at my face, and the suns were laughing too. "Then light it, vermin," he said. "Light it, and the compact will kneel to you. Light it, and I will personally sign your pardon in the Register of Heroes." He was not being generous. He was being thorough. The thing he signed while he laughed, the thing his mirror-robed clerks formalized while they laughed, was an order commissioning me with a ship. Not a good ship. Not a serviceable ship. A condemned ship, a hulk scheduled for the breakers, a scow with a dead drive, and a pitted hull, and a name that had been painted over so many times no one remembered what it used to be. Called. The ship was the execution. He wanted witnesses. He wanted it in the record, so that when the human vermin got herself eaten by the dead star's toothless jaws, the compact could point at the entry and say, "We tried. Look at how generous we were. We gave her a ship." I read the order. I read the mile of fine print under the order. And then I looked up at Velcair, and I smiled the smile the deep seams taught me, and I said, "I'll take it, and I'll take your betting pool too, Prefect. Word is the clerks have already opened one on how long I last." The corridor, they told me afterward, went very quiet. A vermin should not know about the betting pool. A vermin should not mention it in front of the Prefect. A vermin should not smile like that, like she had already won, like the star was already lighting up the sky behind her eyes. I learned later that the pool had 23 entries, and that every single one of them, including the one placed by a young clerk who had once touched the hull of a human ship and never been the same, had bet against me on the grounds that I would not reach the ring, or would reach it and run, or would reach it and touch it and freeze solid in the time it takes a heart to miss a beat. None of them, not one, placed a bet that I would come back. The clerk who placed the 23rd bet, the one about the hull, the one who had touched the hull, she bet both ways. She bet against me reaching the ring, and she bet against me coming back, and I would not understand that for a long time. Despair, I thought, was a single vote. It turns out despair is a coin with two faces, both of them pressed out of the same cold metal, both of them reading. Humans always try. She was right. That is the thing about the Kalari betting pool, and about the Kalari in general, and about everyone who has ever stood at the rim of a human's plan and laughed. Nobody ever bets on the try. They only bet on the fall. They had 11 days to wait. 11 days is a lifetime, if you spend it right. I spent the first 2 in the Meridian's library of remains, which the compact maintains, so that scholars may study the Athlon the way a physician studies a corpse. And I read everything they had that the clerks had not censored, which is to say, I read their lies very carefully. And the truth leaked through the seams of the lies the way water leaks through a patched hull. And by the end of day 2, I knew the shape of what had happened. And the shape of what had happened was enough to make the deep seams of me go quiet with something that was almost reverence. Here is what the compact believes, and teaches, and polices. The Athlon were the elder race. They built the road of 900 gates. They built the lantern to feed it, a star in a cage, burning for the convenience of commerce, the way other species keep reactors. And then, for reasons the scholars call ascension, and the priests call God home, and the economists call a tragic contraction of the labor force, the Athlon left. They expired. They folded themselves into myth and vacuum, leaving their machines running and their gates dark and their great lantern guttering. And the galaxy has been walking around the corpse ever since, respectful, frightened, and slightly annoyed at the inconvenience. That is the lie. And here is the seam in it. The lantern did not gutter. A star does not gutter. A star, left to itself, burns for billions of years. The compact's own records admit the Athlon engineered this one to burn for 100 billion. And it does not go out because the species that lit it decides to go on vacation. Stars are not obedient. They are the most disobedient things in the universe. The only way to make a star go out, the only way in all of physics, is to put something in the way. The ring is the something, and I had already touched it, and I had already felt the hum, and I had already read the word on the seam, and I had already understood, standing under that enormous cold ribbon with my hand flat against its folded metal, that the star was not out. It was banked, like a coal, like a forge left warm for someone to come back to. The question is what the Athlon were guarding. The question is what they were keeping out. And the answer, I found it in the oldest of the library's records. and a folio that had been misfiled under domestic architecture, because some clerk 1,000 years ago believed the images of the lantern's interior were blueprints for a building. The answer is the hollow. You have heard of the hollow if you have ever stood at the rim of the galaxy and felt something look back at you from inside the dark. The Kalari call it a myth, a nursery tale, the thing that eats the lights that go out. They are wrong about that too. The hollow is not a myth. The hollow is what the Athens shipped in chains across the dark for 1 billion years. Not a species, not an army, not a god, a hunger, a field of hunger, a drift of cold emptiness that moves toward light the way water moves toward down. And when it crosses a lit world, the lit world goes dark, and the dark that is left is not the same dark that was there before. It is a dark with appetite. The Athens, in their wisdom, or their fear, or their guilt, the pressure script does not distinguish, and neither anymore do I, built the lantern to hold the hollow back. The lantern was never a lamp for shipping lanes. It was a sword, a wall, a sun set in the path of the hunger, because hunger does not understand walls, but it understands burning. It was dying of old age, the Athens said, and they said it the way a man says he is going out for a walk, when he means he is going to dig a grave and lie down in it. When the Athens could no longer keep the star fed, when their civilization was old and tired, and had spent 1 billion years holding a door, they did not let the door fall. They banked it. They went inside the light, 30,000 of them, the last of their kind, and they turned the star down to a coal, and they locked the ring around it, and they stayed. The compact calls the lantern a tomb, and the compact is, for once in its history, correct. It is a tomb. It is a tomb with a light in it. It is a tomb that has been waiting 30,000 years for someone to come and understand what was smothered there, and why, and to pick up the coal and finish the sentence. That is not a legend. That is not piety. That is pressure script, pressed into metal, readable by hand, and I have read it twice now, and I will read it a 3rd time before I am done, and by the time I am done the whole galaxy will have read it, whether it wants to or not, whether it believes it or not, because fire is the oldest text there is, and everyone can read flame. Now you are asking who I am to read it. Who is this human, this rim vermin, this stray dog with a warrant and a price on her head, to put her bare palm on the last work of the elder race and call it an unfinished sentence? Fair question. Here is the answer, and it is not a pretty one. I am from the seams. You want the whole truth. I am from the parts of human space that the compact never visits and never believed in. The mining worlds, the dive worlds, the worlds where the sky is a rumor and the floor is a furnace. I spent 11 years in the bones of dead worlds. If that sounds like a figure of speech, it is not. We mine the bodies of stars. When a star dies in human space, when a sun collapses and leaves a diamond the size of a continent, a crust the size of a moon, a heart the size of a city made of material that does not exist anywhere else in nature, we go inside. That is what humans do with dead things. We go inside them. The Kalari seal them off and write catalogs. The Athens sealed them off and wrote elegies. Humans drill a hole and climb in, because inside every dead thing there is something alive, and it is usually valuable, and it is always worth the risk. The seams teach you things. They teach you to read the walls, because the walls have been reading you. They teach you to hear the hum under the hum, because the hum is geology in motion, and if you cannot hear it, you will not know when it stops being rotation and starts being collapse. They teach you to keep your hands bare when it matters, because gloves are lies, and the truth of a surface is in the pressure of it, and a lie between your skin and the rock is how crews die. And they teach you the most important thing of all, the thing no academy teaches and no prefect believes. Dead things are not dead. They are waiting. The Athens knew it. The proof is in the ring, in the seam, in the word. And I knew it the way a miner knows a seam that is going to give, because I had been inside enough dead things to know the difference between a thing that is finished and a thing that is holding its breath. Day 4, I went to the ship. The ship looked the way the compact looks at everything that is not theirs, like a problem to be disposed of. She was a breakers-bound scow, a 100-year-old cargo hauler, the kind of ship the galaxy forgets while she is still in it. Her hull was pitted like the bottom of the sea. Her name had been painted over so many times you could read the ghost of it if you angled the light. The last layer said something in Kalari that translated badly. to nothing here, continue. I laughed at that, standing on the gantry, and the dock master asked what was funny, and I said, she's already got her name. She's the long way home. I named her that then, on the spot, and it is the truest thing I have ever named, because every human thing that has ever mattered was trying to get home, and this ship, this rusted condemned scow with a drive that had not spun in a decade, was going to make the longest way home there has ever been, or she was going to die trying, which is the same thing, and which is the thing I am best at. The dock master laughed too, and walked away, and I let him. I did not tell him that the way mine waits by the door when it knows the storm is coming was the only warning he was going to get. 4 days, I worked on her. The compact thought I was dithering. The betting pool, I learned later, added a wager that I was building a coffin and laying down in it. What I was actually doing was what I did in the seams. Every dive, every shift, making the dead thing live again by hand, because no one else was going to do it. The drive came back first, because a dive is nothing without legs. I stripped the injectors, rebuilt the seals out of scrap the breakers had already rejected, and ran her on a whisper of fuel until she coughed and held and coughed and held, and then held steady. And the note of that steady burn was the same note the deck plate sang, the same note the ring sang, and I stood in the engine room with my hand on the manifold and felt the whole rusted ship humming A-flat, and I knew she was mine. The refractory plates came second. I ripped them off a dead cutter in the breaker yards and welded them to the long way home's belly in a pattern that was not a pattern, a dive plating pattern, the kind that sheds heat in 100 directions so the dark can never find the seam. The dock master came down to watch, and he watched for a long time, and then he said, in the tones of a man who has stopped being amused, "You are not going to the ring." "I am going through it," I said. He walked away and did not come back, and that was fine, because I did not want him to see the rest of it. The rest of it was the keel cable, 2 kilometers of braided null steel, the kind we used in the seams to lower whole crews into the dark. You cut it by unbraiding it strand by strand. If you have an hour, and you do not cut it by force, because it will cut you first, I lashed her to the frame with it. And the dive lashes, the ones you learn because you will not be coming back for the frame, and you would like the frame to still be there when you do. And the rest of it was the chime. The chime was the only thing I stole. It was one of 4 kept in the library of remains, under glass, labeled weather instrument, unidentified Athens. It was not a weather instrument. I knew it the moment I saw it through the glass, the way you know a face you have seen in a dream. It was a note tool, a bell, a tuning ear, the instrument the Athven used to speak to the lantern when the lantern was a flame instead of a coal. It was a hand's length of folded metal, gray as ash, cold as the ring, and it weighed nothing and it weighed everything, and the case it was in had a ward on it that the library security thought was unbreakable. The ward was a pressure lock. The ward was a word in pressure script, a word that translated roughly to please. And I had spent 11 years in the seams learning what pressure script wants, and it wanted a bare hand that knew the difference between a door and a wall. I took the chime on day 5, in the dark, and I did not break the glass, because the glass was not the lock. The lock was the case, and the case opened for me the way the ring would open for me, the way all of it was going to open for me, because, and this is the thing the Kalari will never believe, and the thing the betting pool will never recover from, the Athven did not build the road for the Athven. They built it for the ones who would come after. They banked the star for the hand that would come to carry the coal. They wrote the word in pressure script, not in light, because light is a language of the present, and pressure is a language of the always. And they knew the only creature in the galaxy that still speaks pressure is the creature that lives in the seams of dead worlds, the creature that climbs inside the corpse to find the heart. They wrote the word for us. They left the coal for us. And 30,000 years later, a human vermin with a price on her head stood in a marble library with a stolen chime in her hand and understood, completely, that she had been sent for. Day 6, I filed a flight plan. The flight plan was the hardest work I did that week. The compact required a destination, a purpose, a manifest, a safety assessment, an environmental impact statement, a cultural heritage consultation, a certified legal disclaimer absolving the compact of all consequences arising, and a field for other. I filled out every field with the truth, which I have learned is the best camouflage in creation, because no one believes it. For destination, I wrote the morning ring. For purpose, I wrote, relight the star. For the cultural heritage consultation, I wrote, the heritage has been waiting. It would like to be consulted. It says hello. For other, I wrote my name, over and over, in a column tall enough to be a signature and wide enough to be a prayer. My real name, the name from before the warrant, the name my mother gave me before she went into a scene on a world whose name I no longer say, and did not come back. The clerks who processed the form said later that they assumed it was a cipher. It was not a cipher. It was just a name, and it was the only thing I owned that had never been painted over, and I put it on the form because I had decided, in the middle of day 6, in the middle of writing the words, relight the star, that I was not planning on doing this anonymously. Every story that matters has a name on it. Every coal that is carried has a name on the carrying. I was going to relight the lantern of the last road, and I was going to do it as myself. And if the universe wanted to argue about the merits of a human name on an Advent miracle, the universe could argue about it in the light. Day 7, they sent the Undertaker. The Undertaker was not a person. It was a ship, a compact breaker dreadnought, a mile of black hull designed for one purpose, the dismantling of dangerous stellar objects. It took up position at the rim of the Meridian system, far enough away to observe, close enough to cut, and its commander sent a message through official channels. The housing of the lantern had been assessed as a structural risk to the Meridian, and the compact had resolved to decommission it in full, the ring to be severed by lance and the bank mast to be dropped into the local gravity well, where it could harm no one. The message added, in an unofficial postscript that leaked despite every encryption the compact owned. The vermin's 4 days are noted. The lantern will be sundered at the end of 10. Whatever the human intends, it will not be permitted to interfere with a lawful decommission. Commander Thel of the Undertaker. His clerks, I was told, had placed a bet in the pool. He was betting on the sundering. He was betting, in the way that certainty bets, that the coal was a relic, and the star was a corpse, and the universe was a ledger. I read the message on day 7, standing in the long way home's cockpit with the chime in my lap, and I did not answer it. I was already gone. I'm going to tell you what the inside of the ring looks like, because you will never see it, and because it is the thing I carry with me everywhere now, the way other people carry photographs. But first, the getting there. The getting there was 11 hours of the loneliest flying there is, because the long way home was a scowl, and scowls fly the way death approaches, sideways, in fits, complaining. I took her out of the Meridian on a dead-crawl trajectory, hugging the shadow of a comet, because the compact wanted witnesses, and I wanted none. Her drive held. Her old engines made a note like a cough being swallowed, and the chime, which I had hung from the console on a null steel thread, answered it, not with a note of its own, not yet, but with a silence shaped like attention, the way a well answers a dropped stone. The word it was waiting for, I thought, was mine. I was wrong about that, too. The word was the stars. I crossed the quarantine cordon south, through the hole I had made on day 3, and I did not see a single compact patrol, and that, more than anything, told me how the wind was blowing. They wanted me gone so badly, they had let the door stand open. They wanted to be able to say, afterward, that the human had left under her own power, of her own will, into the dark that would kill her, and that the compact's hands were clean, and that the betting pool had been settled out of the record, and that the star, having eaten its vermin, was ready for decommission. The last thing I saw before the ring occluded the sun was the Undertaker, a mile of black intent, swinging ponderously around the rim, like a shark getting interested. I did not watch it long. I had eyes only for the ring. From 100,000 kilometers out it was just a ribbon of shadow, a hair-thin crescent across the dead star's face, and the dead star behind it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life, because it was not dead. I could see it now, with the old senses, the dive senses, the ones that read the dark the way pressure script reads a wall. The star was balled up inside its own gravity like a fist. It had drawn itself in, under the ring's smothering, into a knot of degenerate matter the size of a small moon, and the knot was warm, not burning. There is no flame in a bank star, no fusion, no light, but warm. Warm the way the center of a pile of ash is warm a day after the fire has gone out. Warm the way a hand is warm under a blanket. Warm the way a heartbeat is warm under a sternum. I had never in 11 years of dive seen a dead thing that was this alive. I had been wrong all along. And right too. Wrong about the scale, right about the note. The note was the giveaway. And the note was A-flat. And the note was coming through the hull now. Through the deck, through my boots, through my sternum. And the chime on its null steel thread was swinging in slow circles like a compass looking for a pole it could not find. I am going to be honest with you about the next part, because the honest version is the only version worth the air. I was afraid. Not the clean fear of the seams, which is a working fear, a fear you use. The fear of the dive. The fear with a checklist and a rope and a procedure. This was the other fear. The bottomless one. The one you feel as a child, standing at the edge of the dark, when the dark is not empty. The ring was not empty. I had known it on day 3, with my hand on the seam. I knew it better now, with the chime swinging, and the star warm, and the undertaker turning its mile of hull toward the lantern like a shark turning toward a wounded thing. The ring was occupied. It had been occupied for 30,000 years, and I was flying into it alone, in a rusted scow with a stolen bell and a painted-over name. Here's what I told myself, and here's what I would tell you if you ever find yourself at the rim of something too big for your hands. The hollow is not the dark. The hollow is the dark that feeds, and the only thing the dark has ever respected in the whole history of the universe is a thing that is willing to burn. The Athyn knew it. They banked a whole star on it. They wrote it in pressure script on the door, and the word was not danger. It did not stay away. And the more I read it, the more I was sure. The word was soon. Maybe you have to be from the seams to understand. Maybe you have to have spent 11 years inside the bodies of dead things, with your palm flat on the rock, feeling the place where the rock is warm though the world above is dead. To understand what it means when the universe writes soon on a lock. It means the one who is coming is already on the way. It means the door will open for them when they arrive. It means everything that has to be true for the door to open has already been made true by the ones who sealed it, for the one who would come. And here is the thing I have never been able to explain to anyone, not even to myself, not even to the clerk who touched the hull of a human ship and was never the same. When I read soon on the seam and felt the star's warm fist under the cold and heard the A-flat hum through my sternum, I knew I was the one it was written for. Not because I am special. I am not. I am a diver from the seams with a warrant and a price on her head and a ship the compact gave her to die in. I am the opposite of special. I am common. I am the creature that climbs inside the corpse, because that is what my species does, because that is what we have always done, because every human that ever stood on a rim and looked into what no one else would look into, and went anyway, every one of us was the one the word was written for. The Athyn left a coal for a species that reads pressure. They left it for a species that climbs in. They left it for my mother, who went into a seam and did not come back and took the world with her. And they left it for me, who climbed in after, the way humans climb in, the way the whole species climbs in, generation after generation, because the coal is there and somebody has to carry it. That is not arrogance. Arrogance is the compact's assumption that the universe is a ledger. What I felt, falling toward the ring in a rusted scow with a stolen bell, was the opposite of arrogance. It was the feeling of being carried, of being expected, of the door being left open for me since before my species had fire. I came in under the ring at dusk. The meridian sun was setting from the station's angle, and the ring was slung across the dark like a jaw, and I killed the drive and let the long way home drift on our last momentum, the way you drift a boarding line in, and I stood in the cockpit with my boots off and my gloves off and both hands on the cold housing of the console, feeling the chime swing, and then the vacuum went away. Not the air, the vacuum, the noise of emptiness, the nothing I had been flying through for 11 hours, the absence that presses on a diver's skin and tells her she is outside the world. It stopped. One moment there was the flat silence of space, the silence that has a texture, that you learn to read the way you read a wall. The next moment there was the other silence, the silence of a room that is full of people holding their breath. The chime swung once, twice, and then it stopped swinging, and it hung there, and it began to sound a note of its own accord, A-flat. I am not going to pretend I understood that note when I heard it. Understanding came later, in pieces, like it always does. What I knew in that moment, with my hands flat on the cold housing, and the chime ringing unbidden in the dark, and the star's warm fist pulsing somewhere under all that smothering mass, was simpler and older, and the kind of knowing that does not pass through the mind at all. I was not alone. I had not been alone since the day I put my hand on the seam. And whatever had been waiting inside the ring for 30,000 years, whatever had banked a star and written the word and left the door open, it had heard me coming. It had been listening the whole time. The note changed. That was the thing I had not expected. I had spent 4 hours under the ring on day 3, reading pressure script with my palm, feeling the hum, and the hum had been steady the whole time. A held note, a patient note, the note of something keeping time. But now, with the chime ringing and my hands flat on the cold housing and my whole attention poured into the dark the way a diver pours attention into a wall she is reading, the note shifted, A-flat, and then a hair under it, a hair over it, a note sliding like a voice finding a register, like a throat clearing after 30,000 years of silence. The lantern was not just banked, it was announcing, and far behind me, a mile of black hull had begun to move, and its lance was warming, and I had fewer than 4 days left, and then fewer than I could count on the fingers of both hands. I should have been afraid. I was afraid. I was afraid the way you are afraid standing at the rim of a seam you know is going to give. The working fear. A fear with a checklist. And I picked up the chime, and I let it ring against my sternum, and I felt the note go through me the way the star's note had come through the deck on day 1. And I said, out loud, to the ring, to the star, to the thing that had been waiting, I said, I've got the coal. Where do you want it? And the ring, 30,000 years old, 9,000 kilometers of folded metal, the lock on the last work of the elder race, answered me. It opened. Not all of it. Not with a sound. You will not hear the ring open. It does not open the way doors open. It opens the way a fist unclenches, the way a jaw unhinges, the way a hand lets go of something it has been holding for an age of the galaxy. A seam ran along the equator of the ring like a hairline, like the crack I had followed on day 3, and it widened, and the widening was silent, and through the widening came light. Not starlight, not flame light, not the light of anything that burns. It was the light of the inside of a pocket, the light of a place that has been sealed and warm and full of what was put there. The way a safe is lightless but full of weight. It was pressure made visible. It was the Advent script, all of it, the whole library, the whole elegy, the whole sentence that had been waiting 300 centuries for someone to read it to the end. And it was not written on the ring. It was written on the inside of the ring. It was the wall of the tunnel, and the tunnel went down into the heart of the bank star, and the tunnel was lined with the dead. No, not the dead. That is the compact's word, and the compact is half right, and the half they are wrong about is the half that matters, and it has never mattered more than it mattered in that moment. When I stood at the mouth of the tunnel, with the chime ringing against my sternum and understood, with the whole of my body, what I was looking at, the tunnel was lined with the Athven, 30,000 of them, the last generation, the ones who had banked a star and locked the door and stayed. They were held in the wall of the tunnel the way a diver is held in a cradle of safety webbing, except the webbing was light, and the light was the current of their own slow dying. And they were not asleep, and they were not dead, and they were not awake. They were wound down, banked, like the star, like the coal. They had become the battery, the way the founders of a family become the foundation, invisible, necessary, warm. They had not died 30,000 years ago. They had been dying for 30,000 years, so the star could stay warm, so the coal could stay alive, so the door could stay open for whoever read the word and brought the fire. Their faces were turned to me, all of them, 30,000 faces folded into the light of the wall, worn smooth by ages of the dark, and they were not looking at me in judgment, and they were not looking at me in hope. They were looking at me the way the wall looks at the diver, the way the pressure script looks at the hand that reads it, the way a door looks at the key it was cut for. I understood, standing at the mouth of the tunnel with the chime ringing and the A-flat notes sliding through the dark, that I had been wrong about the mission. Everyone had been wrong. The compact thought the lantern was a museum. Half right. The scholars thought it was a tomb. Half right. The priests thought it was a god home. Half right. And the half they were wrong about is the half that matters, because the Athven were not up in the light, folded into myth and vacuum. They were down here, in the dark, holding the door, being the battery, so the coal would stay warm, so some hand that read the word could come, and carry it, and finish the sentence. They had banked themselves, is what I am trying to tell you. The whole species, the elder race, the builders of the road of 900 gates, they had gone inside the light, and turned it down, and banked themselves along with it. The way a family banks a fire before the long winter, the way a mother banks a fire before she goes out into the storm and does not come back. And they had been waiting, 30,000 years, for the hands that read pressure, for the creature that climbs in. For me, the chime rang once, and then it did not stop ringing. The note it rang was not A-flattening. It was the note of the tunnel. It was the note of 30,000 Athven breathing in their sleep. It was the note of the coal, waiting at the heart of the banked star, warm under the smothering mass. And far behind me, above me, out in the lightless noise of the meridian, the Undertaker's lance had come fully to power, and its commander was giving the order to sunder, and there were no longer days left to count. There was just the tunnel, and the coal, and me. I went in. The tunnel did not take me down so much as it took me in. There is a difference, and I have spent the rest of my life trying to explain it. A mine shaft goes down. You can feel the geometry of it in your knees. The weight of the rock above you. The distance you will have to climb back. The tunnel in the ring did not do that. It went in. The way a thought goes in. The way a memory goes in. The way a name goes in when you are trying to remember where you heard it. The walls were not rock, and they were not metal. They were the Athven, and the Athven were not holding the walls up. They were the walls, and the tunnel was the shape of their last shared intention, the way a riverbed is the shape of a river that has gone dry. I walked. Somewhere far behind me, I left the long way home with the drive cold and the hatch open, because I understood, early and completely, that I was not going to be coming back the way I came. Walking is the wrong word. I drifted, the way you drift in a seam when the gravity is off and the dark is thick. But I will say walked, because walked is the word that makes sense to you. And what happened to me down there makes sense to no one. The Athven in the walls were not dead. I have said this, but I will say it again, because it is the whole story, and the whole story fits in that sentence. The Athven were not dead. Watch one long enough, and I watched them for 8 hours, as I went deeper, as the chimes sang against my sternum, and the A-flat note of the whole enormous structure settled into my bones, and you saw the small movements. A fold of light adjusting itself along a cheekbone, a pressure right shifting, 0.5 millimeter on a forehead, the way a sleeper turns in a bed, except the bed was 30,000 years long, and the turning took decades. They were keeping the battery charged. I understand that now, the way I understand anything about them, which is to say, barely and forever, and with my hands. They had joined themselves to the machine, the way the first divers whom my people sent into the first seemed joined themselves to the rock, with a submission that is also a mastery, a decision that is also a surrender. They were the coal's keepers. They were the fire's memory. They were the ones who had chosen to become the part of the star that remembers being light, and they had been doing it for so long that they had forgotten the shape of their own faces. The walls wore them the way the walls of a cathedral were the saints, worn smooth by the weather of centuries, readable only by those who knew what to look for. I knew what to look for. One of them. I found her halfway down, the deepest of the deep. The one the others had been built around the way a choir is built around a lead voice, had her hand out, folded in the light of the wall, 30,000 years deep in the dark of the tunnel. This one had her hand out, palm up, open, waiting, not reaching for me. It did not reach. It was simply open. It had been open for so long that the light of the wall had grown around it, the way a tree grows around a wire fence, and the hand was the shape of the word at the center of the tunnel. The word I had read on the seam of the ring on day 3. The word I had been carrying since before I knew I was carrying anything. I stopped. I stood in front of that open hand, and I understood that the whole tunnel, the whole ring, the whole lantern, the whole 30,000-year vigil of the elder race, all of it had been built so that this hand could be held, not by me, I am not the one. I will tell you the truth now, the truth I have been circling since I began. I am not the one who was meant to take the coal. I was only the one who came. The difference is the entire story, and it is the entire story of my species, and it is why the compact will never understand us, and why the betting pool will never stop losing. The Athvin did not leave the lantern for a hero. They left it for a delivery system. They knew, the way elders know, that the one who is meant to come is rarely the one who arrives. The one who arrives is the one who is willing. They wrote the word soon, not to summon the chosen, but to tell the willing which door was theirs. Every human who has ever walked into a room no one else would enter. Every diver who has ever gone down a shaft no one else would descend. Every mother who has ever gone out into the storm and not come back. We are not the chosen. We are the willing. And the universe, it turns out, has been running on the willing for a very long time. And the Athvin knew it. And they built a whole star on it. And they banked themselves to keep it warm until one of us showed up with a stolen bell and a painted-over ship and a name on a flight plan form that no one believed. I took the hand. That is not right either. I am sorry. The words keep failing me. Down here, talking to you across all that distance. Let me try once more slowly. The way you describe a color to someone who has never seen it. The open hand was not a hand. It was a word. It was the word carry in pressure script, the last word of the last Athvin, pressed into the light of the wall by a species that had spent its final century becoming a battery, so that one open hand could be there for whoever came. And when I put my own hand into it, bare, as the seams taught me, glove off. The way you touch a sick child's forehead. The walls of the tunnel answered me the way the hull of the long way home had answered me. The way the deck plates had answered me on day 1. The way the ring had answered me on day 3. The whole structure sang. I felt it first in my palm, where the open hand closed. No, not closed. Accepted. The way a cradle accepts. The way a socket accepts a joint. The pressure right on my palm spelled a sentence, and I read it with my skin the way I had read the seam. And the sentence was not "you are chosen," and not "thank you," and not "we forgive you for being small." The sentence was the whole history of the species, compressed to a line you can hold on a palm, the way a mother writes a note you can carry in a pocket. We kept it warm. Now you carry it. The road is waiting for its fire. And then the light of the wall, the battery light, the patient 30,000-year dying. It did not go out. I have to be careful here, because the compact will seize on any word I say and file it in the record. And the record is a liar. And I will not let them put a lie on that moment. The light did not go out. It passed. It left the walls the way blood leaves a face, the way breath leaves a sleeper, not in alarm, but in completion, in release, in the way a held note finally resolves. 30,000 Athvin, folded into the walls, wound down, banked, had been sending their small dying into the cold for an age of the galaxy, keeping it warm, keeping it alive, keeping it possible. And now, with a human's bare hand in the open hand of the last of them, they were doing the last thing they had ever owed the universe to do. They were handing it off. The light slid down the tunnel ahead of me, the way a current slides down a river, pulling toward the heart, and it took the chime with it. I felt the bell in my hand go from cold to warm, from metal to something that was not metal, from the instrument of the Athvin to the instrument of what came after. And I walked, and the walking was easier now, the way walking is easier when you are being pulled, and the walls were empty now. The walls were just wall. The 30,000 were gone the way a family is gone in the morning, and I understood, with a grief so large there was no room in me for fear, that I was not carrying the coal alone. I was carrying them. The tunnel ended. If a thing that opens that way can be said to end in a room, I will call it a room. It was the heart of the bank star, the place where the knot of degenerate matter had drawn itself into weight, the fist I had felt from 100,000 kilometers out. The room was bigger than worlds and smaller than a held breath, because down there, at the bottom of the ring, in the dark where the elder race had kept their vigil, physics had stopped pretending to hold its shape and had become what it always was in the deep places, a language. And the language of the room said, in pressure script, in fire script, in the script of the always, the coal. It hung in the center of the room, the way a coal hangs in the center of a forge, small, compared to worlds, about the size, I would say, of a human skull, which is the size things get when they have been waiting a long time, and warm, and the warmth was not the warmth I had felt from outside, which had been the warmth of 30,000 dying Afghan passing their small heat along a chain. This was the other warmth, the bottom one, the one at the bottom of the pile of ash, the one that is not dying and not passing and not waiting, the one that is still burning. The chimes sang against my sternum, and the note it sang was not A-flat anymore. It was the note of the room. It was the note of the cold. It was the note that the whole lantern had been singing the whole time, through the deck plates of the meridian, through the ribs of the ring, through the walls of the tunnel, through the open hand of the last athlete. The same note, the patient note, the note that means, I am still here, and somewhere above me, through 9,000 kilometers of folded metal and 8 hours of tunnel and the faithful old hull of the long way home, through the vacuum and the dark and the mile of the Undertaker's intent, I heard the second note, not A-flat, not the star's note, the other one, the one that had been brought into the system on day 7, in a black hull, with a lance warming and a commander certain and a betting pool settled out of the record, the note of the sundering, the note of the decommission, the note of the ledger. I put both hands on the coal. I want to tell you what happened next, but I have to tell you first about Commander Thel, because what happened next happened to him more than it happened to me. And he is the one the compact will point to when they tell the story, and he is the one who will have to live with what he saw. Commander Thel of the Undertaker was a good soldier. I will give him that, and I give it to him freely, because it cost him everything, and he deserves the one true thing his enemies can say about him. He was the compact's best, that is not rhetoric. He had the record and the scars and the citation, and he had the particular quality that the compact prizes above all others, which is the ability to keep a ledger in the middle of a storm. He did not lie to himself, and he did not lie to his crew, and he did not lie to the universe. He merely refused to believe that the universe could be anything other than a ledger. A star goes out, it is out. A species expires, it is expired. A mission is given, it is done. The lantern was a hazard and a corpse and a museum, and the human was vermin, and the decommission was lawful, and the lance was warming, and the countdown was running, and nothing in the universe had ever once surprised a man who kept the ledger correctly. He was wrong. He was, I think, the most wrong man in the history of the Meridian, and he was wrong in the way that matters most, which is the wrongness of the certain. And he was wrong for the best of reasons, which is that he had never once in his life seen a species like mine. Here's what I did. Down in the room, with my hands on the coal, I picked it up. You are waiting for something more. I understand. You have been told, by 1,000 stories, that the relighting of a star should require a ritual, a sacrifice, a word of power, spoken by a chosen one with the light of destiny in her eyes. The Kalari believe this. The Compact's priests believe it. The betting pool was founded on it, and they are all of them half right, and the half they are wrong about is the half that matters, and it has never mattered more than it mattered at the bottom of the ring, with the lance warming above and the ledger running, and the coal in my hands. The coal was not a ritual. It was a thing a species had carried, in its way, for 1 billion years. A thing the last of them had kept warm for 30,000 more. A thing that had been waiting, the whole time, not for a ceremony, but for a pair of hands. Hands that read pressure. Hands that had spent 11 years inside the bodies of dead things, learning the difference between a thing that is finished and a thing that is holding its breath. Hands that have been sent for, the way the willing are always sent for, by a universe that has been running on the willing since before there was a word for it. I picked up the coal. I held it in both hands, the way you hold a child, the way you hold a flame you have been guarding against the wind your whole life, the way my mother would have held it, my mother who went into a seam and did not come back, my mother who taught me the only lesson that ever mattered, that the dead things are not dead, they are waiting, and the waiting ends when someone picks up the load. And I carried it, the walk back up the tunnel. I will not linger on it, because it was not the walk down. The walk down was a vigil, 8 hours long, through the walls of the dying. The walk up was the same tunnel, and the walls were only walls, and the light was only light, and the 30,000 were gone the way they had always intended to be gone, finished, released, handed off, and the only thing in the tunnel was me, and the coal, and the note. Oh, the note. You will ask, and I will tell you. The note was the thing. the whole way up. And the way up took no time at all, because a thing that is being carried toward a fire does not measure distance the way a thing being walked measures distance. The whole way up, the coal sang. Not A flat, not the note of the derelict, the note of the dying, the note of the waiting. The coal sang the note it had been banked to sing, the note it had kept warm through 30,000 years of the dark, the note that the Athen had folded themselves into a battery to preserve, the note that is older than the species that built the road, older than the hump of the road was built to hold, older than light, older than the difference between a thing that burns and the thing that is fuel, the note of fire itself, and the long way home heard me coming, and the faithful old hull, the rusted scow with the painted over name, the ship I had named on a gantry in front of a laughing dockmaster, the ship the compact had given me to die in. She lit her drive before I reached the hatch, not on my command, on the note, her old engines, which I had rebuilt with scrap and patience and the same stubbornness, hummed up to a whisper, and the whisper became a song, and the song was A-flat, and then it was not A-flat. It was the coal's note. It was fire's note. It was the note the whole system had been waiting for, and I broke the surface of the ring the way a diver breaks the surface of a seam that is finally given, and I was on the deck, in the cockpit, with the coal in my hands, and the chimes singing against my sternum, and the vacuum of the meridian all around me, and the note filling everything. The Undertaker had been moving for hours. The lance had been warming for days. Commander Thel, I was told later, and I have the record, and the record is a liar, but the record is also the only thing the compact believes, so I keep that page. Commander Thel had given the order to sunder the ring 11 minutes before I broke the surface. The lance was at full power. The targeting solution was locked on the seam. I had found on day 3 the seam that was not a crack but a mouth, the mouth that had opened for me and closed behind me and would never be a mouth again, because I had taken what it was guarding. He could have fired. He had 11 minutes of clearance. He had the order, the authority, the ledger, the certainty, the betting pool's blessing, and the full weight of the compact behind him. He could have fired, and the lance would have cut the ring in half, and the coal would have gone dark, and the story would have ended there, with a human vermin and a stolen bell and a painted-over ship atomized in a lawful decommission, and the ledger would have been balanced, and the betting pool would have been settled out of the record, and the galaxy would have gone on being half right. He did not fire. I will tell you why, and I will tell it the way I heard it, from a young weapons officer who was there and who later, when the compact tried to purge the whole affair from the record, chose to keep the page and the memory and the fear. The lance was at full power. The solution was locked. The commander's hand was on the firing control. The testimony differs on whether his thumb was actually on it. The young officer says it was, and the record says it was not, and the record is a liar, and the young officer was there, and the countdown reached 0, and the firing window opened, and Commander Thel of the Undertaker looked out of his armored main viewport, across 9,000 kilometers of the meridian's dark, at the morning ring of the lantern of the last road, and the ring was glowing, not with the dim cold glow of the derelict, not with the patient warmth of the banked, not with the light of the battery the 30,000 had made of themselves. The ring was glowing with the other light, the light from inside, the light traveling up a tunnel, the light of a thing being carried, the light of a coal on its way to a fire, and under the light, barely visible, a rusted scow with a painted-over name, a ship the compact had signed over to a condemned human as an execution, was coming out of the ring seam with her drive lit, and her hull singing, and her hatch open, and a single figure standing in the hatch. Standing, not kneeling, not praying, not running, standing, with something in both hands, held the way you hold a child, the way you hold a flame against the wind, the way you hold a thing that has been waiting 30,000 years for someone to pick it up. The young weapons officer says Commander Thel looked at that for a long time. The record says he did not hesitate. The record is a liar. The commander took his hand off the firing control, and he said, the young officer swears he said it, and the record does not record it, and I believe the young officer, because no one who was not there could invent a sentence like this one. He said, that is not a corpse, that is a delivery. And then, because he was a good soldier, and a good soldier knows when the ledger has failed him, Commander Thel of the Undertaker stood down his lance, and stood down his decommission, and stood down every certainty he had ever carried through a black mile of home. And he gave one order, the only order of his life that was not in the ledger, the only order that ever truly mattered. Hold fire. Let her through. Let me tell you what the lighting looked like from the outside, because I was not outside for any of it. I was inside, in the cockpit, with the coal in my hands, and I will tell you what I felt. The young officer will tell you what the system saw, and between the two of us, you will have the whole of it, which is the most any story can ask for. What I felt, the note. It is always the note for me, for my people, for the species that reads pressure and climbs inside dead things and keeps its hands bare when it matters. The coal sang, and the chime answered, and the long way home's old hull carried it, and the ring carried it, and the ribs carried it, and the meridian carried it, and for the last time in its long patient history, the whole enormous structure of the lantern of the last road was one instrument, playing one note, the note it had been banked to play, the note the 30,000 had kept warm with their dying, the note the word on the seam had promised, the note of fire itself. And I stood in the hatch with the coal in both hands, and I did not throw it. I want to be clear about that, because the compact's record insists I threw it, which is the kind of lie that tells you more about the liar than about the deed. I did not throw it. You do not throw a thing that has waited 30,000 years. You do not throw a thing a whole species banked itself to keep warm. You hold it out. The way you hold out a candle to a lantern, the way you hold out a match to a wick, the way you hold out your hand to an open hand, and you let it go. I let it go. And the coal, the size, I told you, of a human skull, the weight of nothing and everything, the temperature of a thing that has been kept warm by the dying of a species, the coal fell, and the falling took no time at all, and it crossed the last 800 meters between the long way home's hatch and the face of the bank star, and the face of the bank star, the knot of degenerate matter that had drawn itself in like a fist to wait, open like a fist opening, like a jaw unhinging, like a hand letting go of something it has been holding for an age of the galaxy. And the star swallowed the coal, the way a mouth swallows the thing it was made for. What the system saw. The young officer tells it better than I can, and I will give you his. System had seen the star open its eye, and the whole galaxy was going to read the story in the light. You came back, she said. She was not surprised. She was stating the outcome of a coin she had already seen land both ways. I came back, I said. Do you know what the pool settled at? She asked. After the moon phase, after the light. The compact voided the early entries. They said the conditions had been impossible to bet on. They were wrong. They are always wrong. The pool settled at 2,000 to 1 against, and then the pool settled the other way. And the people who bet on the fall have been paying out to the people who bet on the try. Except there were no people who bet on the try. There was only the coin. There was only me. She held out her hand. She was not offering the forms. She was offering her hand, the way the last Athvin had offered hers, palm up, open, waiting. I have thought about that hand 1,000 times. Standing in the light of a star, I helped wake, watching the 900 gates of the road come up one by one like a city remembering its lights. I have thought about what it means that the only creature in the meridian who bet on the try was the creature who had touched a human hull, just once, and never been the same. I have thought about what it means that the universe has been running on the willing for longer than there has been a word for will. And I have thought about the word on the seam, the word I read on day 3, the word the whole lantern was built to deliver, the word the 30,000 kept warm with their dying, the word that a human with a price on her head and a ship the compact gave her to die and picked up and carried into the heart of a star. The word was not a prophecy. It was a delivery note. It was the universe saying to the willing, soon. And I will tell you what I said to the clerk, standing in the light of the star, with her hand in mine, with the register of heroes unclaimed in my other hand, with the road lighting up behind us like a question being answered. The fool was wrong. You were right. All of it was right. The Athvin didn't build the lantern to hold a star. They built it to hold the door. And they didn't leave the coal for a hero. They left it for a delivery system, for someone willing, for anyone who reads the word with bare hands and decides that the dead things aren't dead. They're waiting. I'm a diver from the seams. I spent 11 years inside the bodies of dead worlds, And every one of them taught me the same lesson. The only lesson there is, the lesson my mother died learning. Inside every dead thing, there's something alive, and it's usually valuable, and it's always worth the risk. The Kalari seal it off and write catalogs. The Athens sealed it off and wrote elegies. Humans drill a hole and climb in. That's not heroism. That's not destiny. That's just what we do. We carry names that have been painted over. We carry ships the universe has decommissioned. We carry coals that have been waiting 30,000 years for a pair of hands. And when the galaxy looks at a dead star and laughs, when it tells you the thing is finished, the species is expired, the ledger is balanced, you can believe it. You can be half right, like everyone else. Or you can put your hand on the seam and read the word and pick up the load and carry it. The road is waiting for its fire. It has been waiting for a long time. It is still waiting. There are 900 gates, and this was only the first, and the light is already spreading. And somewhere out there, in the deep seams of the galaxy, there are more of us reading the walls with bare hands, more of us climbing into the corpses to find the hearts, more of us who know, the way the elders knew, that the dead things are not dead. They are waiting, and the waiting ends when someone picks up the load. I am going back in now. The star is lit, and the first gate is open, and there are 899 more, and the coal is in the fire, and the fire is in me. And I never once, in 11 years of dives, came back from a seam with nothing to show for it. Come with me, if you're willing. The ship's still warm. The name's still painted over. The seams are still down there, and the walls are still reading anyone who reads them. And the word's still on the door.